5, and we are going to begin with the last few lines of Daled Amid Beis 4b. The Gemara question why everybody agrees, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir agree that noon on the 14th day of Nisan, which is the day before Pesach, before the day before the Seder at night, is the time that everybody agrees chametz is prohibited. The Gemara said because it says several verses which seem to be that contradictory. So we have the first verse is in Shemos 12, 15, where it says, Shivas yamim matzos techelu, 7 days you should eat matzah, however, or but. Bayom Rishon, on the first day, tashbisu seven b'teichem. On the first day, it would seem, of the 7 days, you should make all chametz cease from your house. The problem is that just a few verses later, it says, Shivas yamim, 7 days, you shall not have chametz in your house for the entirety of the 7 days. Well, then how can you say that on the first day, part of the day is going to be permissible and part not? And therefore, the Gemara says that it must be that chametz is that b'yom rishon means the day beforehand, and half the day means some of the day, not all the day. Some of the day is going to be prohibited, some of the day is going to be permitted, and it doesn't yet say why, particularly at noon, but that's where we're up to. So Gemara says the last 4 lines of 4b of Daled Amud Beis. Maybe what it means is the nighttime of the 15th is the time that you have to get rid of the chametz, meaning you check for chametz on the 14th, and you have to destroy it on the 15th at night. So when we're starting the Seder is when you get rid of the chametz in your house. The Salkadat Chamina, because I may have thought Yomim Ksiv. It says 7 days you shall not have chametz in your house. Maybe that's only from the daytime. So the nighttime you can still have chametz, and you can remove it on that day. When it says Bayom Rishon, on the first day you're going to get rid of it, it means the night of the 15th, which is the night of the Seder. So Gemara says, Ksiv Yamim is Yamim in Leilos Lo. Maybe the prohibition is only for days. Kamash Mulan Afila Leilos. So therefore, we need this teaching to tell us even at nights you can't have it. So Gemara says, Ahula Yitzchak Halei. And now we go to 5a, Hey Amin Aleph at the top. You can't, there was no thought at any point that there would be a need to include the nighttime for chametz, prohibition of chametz, because that's very clear already in the verses as well. Why? Because the prohibition of having chametz is clearly connected to also eating matzah. To the prohibition of eating chametz. As the Torah says, for 7 days you shall not have chametz found in your house, because anybody that eats chametz is kares, the soul is cut off. So the connection is made multiple times in the Torah for not having chametz in your house on account of you may come to eat the chametz. And when is the prohibition of chametz? That's also connected to the eating of prohibition of eating chametz is connected to the obligation of eating matzah. So where is this? The Sefer, it says, Shivas yamim sa'orli matzah b'vetechem. 7 days you shall not have chametz found in your house, because anybody that eats the chametz will be their soul will be cut off. So that's clear that the eating of chametz is the reason for not owning any chametz. So we see whenever you can't eat chametz, you're not going to be able to own or have any chametz in your possession. Achilas chametz, achilas matzah. And the eating of chametz is also connected to the eating of matzah. The Chsiv it says, Kol machmetzes leisechelu b'chomesh v'seichem. You shall not eat any machmetzes, any chametz in your house. Leisechelu b'chomesh v'seichem teichlu matzes. And wherever you are, you shall eat matzahs. Ki, and then it continues for where is that? Yeah, I didn't put that in that text. So it says anybody eating, you can't eat chametz, you must eat matzah. Uksiv be b'matzah, and my matzah clearly says be'erev tochlu matzahs. That evening you must eat matzah. So the Torah clearly says eating matzah is the first night, as well as that you shall not eat chametz, you shall eat matzah. So those, whenever you're obligated in eating of matzah, you're also obligated in the prohibition of not having, or the obligation to get rid of chametz, and that happens on the first night. So there's no thought at all to say that the first night of Pesach you can still own chametz and get rid of it that night, because the prohibition of owning chametz is only from the morning. That cannot be, because the Torah clearly links these. The prohibition of owning chametz is because of you may come to eat the chametz, and the prohibition of eating the chametz is at the time that there's an obligation to eat matzah, and the eating of the matzah is clearly stated to be on the first night of Pesach. The Emal Arabis Leil Yudalid Labir. So, okay. So you're telling me that it doesn't mean the first night of Pesach. Maybe it means the 14th at night. You check for chametz and destroy it that night. B'yom ksiv. No, it says by day. Ve'ema mitzafra. Well, then maybe in the morning. Ach cholak. So the statement of but, however, is always a split. It means some of the day. Ach is a break. Rashi has two interpretations here, either because it says ach, which is a limit, so it tells you only some of the day is prohibited, or some gematria, some sort of mnemonic that ach would then turn into, the aleph would turn into a chet, and the aleph, the kaf would turn into a tzadi, and that would be chetz, which means half. In any case, that's the first version over here of the reason we know, or how do we know that noon on the 14th day is the prohibition for chametz. The Rabbi Shmuel Tana, in the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, they had a brisa, and later we're going to have the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel that's different. But in the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, they have a brisa like this. Matzinu Yudalat Shenikra Rishon. We find elsewhere that the 14th day is considered the first day, even though that it is not the first day of the 7 mentioned thereafter, but it's the day before. Barishon Ba'arbasa Yom L'Chodesh, because it says on the 14th day of Barishon Ba'arbasa, since it says on the 14th, so the Torah clearly is calling it the first of the day that the Korban Pesach is brought. So that's what that first means. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar, Rav Nachman Yitzchak says that actually, when it says Rishon, first, it means the day prior in Hebrew. Amar Rishon the Mikara Mashma. When it says Rishon, that's what it means, the day before. And he doesn't need the contradiction or the proofs that he has of the verses before. Just that's the simple meaning. Damakra, it says, Harishon Adam Tivali. Eov is challenging his friends, and he says, Harishon Adam Tivali, were you born prior to the first man, Adam Harishon? So you see, Harishon over there means even though it says first, it means prior. Elamiata says, well, if that's the case, let's look where else the Torah uses Rishon or Harishon and whether that would fit. Because we have another place it says so. It says by Sukkos in Vayikra 23:40, and you will take for yourselves on the first day. And there it says the fruit of a beautiful tree and a palm branch, etc. And you will be joyous in front of Hashem 7 days. So you will take for yourself on the first day the lulav and esrog. Hachanami Rishon the Mikara Mashma. Does it really mean that you will take the lulav the day before Sukkot? No, there it means the first of the 7 days. Well, the end of that verse says, and you will be joyous before Hashem 7 days. So you see, it's referring to the 7 days. Shvi Lachag, just as the 7 mentioned in that very verse is the 7th day of the Chag, so too the first is the first of the Chag. Rishon Lachag. Hachanami, so the says that's not going to help us because here as well it says in our verse, Ach Bayom Harishon, but on the first day, Tashbisu, you will make chametz cease from your houses. And it says at the end of that verse, because anybody that eats chametz, their soul will be cut off from Yisrael, from Am Yisrael, from the first day until the 7th day. And it says, Shivas Yom Matzah Techelu. It says 7 days you will eat matzah. So there also it says a reference to matzah after saying that the removal of the chametz or the seizing of the chametz is on the first day. So Gemara says yes, but im kein nichlev kra rishon. Then it should just say, but rishon, the first day. Why harishon? The first day. So the first day means the day before. So it doesn't help us because it says the same thing by the lulav. It also says ha rishon, the first day. And besides, hasam nechsiv bayom harishon shabbason v'yom hashmini shabbason. There, in the verse right before it, it says, but on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather the harvest of the year, you will joyous before Hashem 7 days. But Yom Harishon Shabbason, on the first day you must cease work, so that's a Shabbos. Yom Hashmini Shabbason, on the 8th day you must cease work, it's a Shabbos. And there it clearly it says Harishon Shabbason, the first day is going to be ceasing of work, and that's clearly the first day of Sukkot. That's not the day before Sukkot. There too, you'd say it's the day before. Of course not. It says no, but it says that that's because it says on the 1st and on the 7th. 1st and the 8th are days of rest. So there it clearly is saying the first of these 7 days of Chag, and then the 8th day, the day after, is going to be a day of Chag as well. It's going to be a Yantiv where you cannot work. Mashmini Shmini the Chag, just as the 8th day is talking about the 8th day of the holiday. Avrisha Risha the Chag, so too the first day is the first day of the holiday. But Ha Rishon, by us, by Matzah, would still mean, by Chametz, would still mean the day before. So Ha Rishon Lamali. And why does it say the first day and the 8th day and not, why does it say Ha Rishon? To tell you that the in-between days are going to be permissible for work. So Gemara says, I don't need the extra hay for that. I don't need it to say Harishon, the first day. Just first and last, 1st and 8th, are sufficient to tell me that the in-between days are not prohibited in work, because it says the first day is prohibited work, the 8th day is prohibited work, and that's enough. I don't need the extra hay of Harishon. No, I need it. Because I may have thought, because it says on the first day and on the 8th day. Well, the and may have connected them, the 1st and 8th, and made all the days in between prohibited. Vav because the and, the vav, which tells us an and should extend the previous conversation. That the first day and the last day, meaning and including all the days in between. Kamash Malan, that's why you needed to say Harishon, the first day, Hashamini, the eighth day, to tell you clearly nothing in between. So it says, great. So you added a vav that told you and therefore you need a hey to minimize that and. Just say the first day, the eighth day, and that's sufficient. That's question number 1. 2, Vesu Hasam Nechsiv Bayom Arisha Mikra Kodesh Yelachem. And besides, in that same section, it says about Pesach as well. Uvachamisha Asar Yom, and on the 15th day of the first month, it's a holiday of matzah. Shivas Yom Matzah Sachelu, you need to eat matzah for 7 days. And then it says, Bayom Harishon Mikra Kodesh, on the first day is a day of rest, a holiday. Yeah, so there too, it's a Shabbos of no work. Rishon and Mikara Mashma, there too, would you say that Harishon means the day prior? Obviously not. The day that you can't do work is the first day of Pesach, and there it says Harishon, the first. So if you're correct that Harishon, the day prior, always means the Harishon, the first day, always means the day prior to the Chag, well then there too the prohibition of work should be on the day prior. Ela Hanish Lish Harishon Mebaylis. And where it says yes, it says Harishon 3 times in that section in Vayikra 23. In regards to Pesach once, and in regards to Sukkot once, and in regards to Lulav once, and we need them for 3 teachings. The Tani, the very Rabbi Shmuel, to the teaching of the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel. The Tani Rabbi Shmuel, Bischar Shlosha Harishon, as a reward for the 3 times that Am Yisrael, that there were 3 firsts, Am Yisrael merited the 3 firsts. Zachar l'shloisha rishon, lahachar zarashal Esav. The 1 rishon is the destruction of Amalek, the descendants of Esav. Lebinyam Beis Hamikdash, it is the reconstruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Uleshmosha Mashiach, and the name of Mashiach. These are 3 things that are called rishon, and we merit them in the merit of the 3 rishons. Lahachar zarashal Esav dechsev vayatza rishon admoni, to destroy Amalek, which is the descendants of Esav. As it says, the Rishon came out, the first child came out red, full of hair. Kula kadera seir. So see, Esav is considered Rishon. Labini Beis Hamikdash, to the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, Kisei Kavod Marom Mirishon, the heavenly throne, elevated from the Rishon, Makom Mikdashenu, which is the place of our temple, of our holy. Mashiach, the name of Mashiach, the Siv Rishon L'Tzion, Hine. The first to Tzion, the leader of Tzion, of Zion, Hine, behold, Hinam, he has arrived. So this 3rd version says that actually the word Harishon in our context means the day prior, even though elsewhere it would have some other teaching, and it would definitely mean the first day of the named Chag. Here, Harishon would mean the day prior, because Harishon could mean, unless otherwise indicated, the day before. Rava Amar Mehacha. Rava says no, there's a different teaching. It says in the pasuk, "Lo sishchata chametz dam zivchi." Do not shecht the korban Pesach while the chametz is still with you. Do not shecht upon the chametz, the blood of my offering. Lo sishchata Pesach v'adayin chametz kain. And that tells us that the Pesach may not be brought when the chametz is still in your possession. So the Torah says, remove the chametz, and 7 days it cannot be in your home. So we know that it has to be beforehand. When do you have to get rid of the chametz? You have to get rid of the chametz. Well, it tells us another thing. It says, don't shech the Pesach, and the chametz is still there. So from the time that you can shech the Pesach, you you must get rid of the chametz. So the time that the Torah says removal of the chametz must coincide with the obligation of bringing the Korban Pesach. Now, even though an individual would only transgress this if they themselves bring their Pesach when they still have chametz, meaning that, and that could be much later in the day because their Korban Pesach may only come at the last minute of the day. Nevertheless, the general prohibition has to coincide that don't have, when the Torah says make chametz cease from your possession, meaning get rid of it, it has to coincide with the other statement which says do not shech your Korban Pesach while you still have chametz. The Gemara says, why? Maybe it's every person when he shechs the Korban Pesach. No, it's man shchita. That would be too individual. It's referring to the time of chametz, the time of the carbon. The time of the carbon coincides with not having chametz. And we'll see later in a few months that the obligation for the Korban Pesach begins at noon. The general idea is that it should be brought after the afternoon tamid. Usually, every carbon has to be brought between the morning tamid and the evening tamid. And the first and last carbon of the day are going to be the morning and evening tamid, the daily carbon. However, for the Korban Pesach, it comes after. It'll be valid if an individual brought it prior to the Korban tamid, but it's meant to come after. But either way, the time for the Korban tamid is the afternoon, and then immediately is the time for the Korban Pesach. So from noon and on is the time for Korban Pesach. And Rashi points out that the Gemara later asks that actually it's 12:30, a half hour after noon, that is the proper time to bring the Korban tamid and the Korban Pesach. And that's really, as Rashi says here, because it's hard to know from that noon has passed until the shadow is cast. So while it's noon, it's hard to know that it's past noon because it may be just prior. So they would wait a half hour after so that there's already a shadow coming from the sun being to the west. And so an eastern shadow would begin to show, and that's when they knew it's after noon. But really the time is from midday. Tanya Namehachi. So Brisa says, so the Gemara says we've seen a few interpretations or a few ways of understanding why the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, is also going to be prohibited in chametz, and that's from noon. And they actually show up in a brisa. We have a Mishnaic text, a brisa that says so. Tanya Nami so we have a brisa like this. Ach bayom harishon tashbisu sor mebetechem. It says, but on the first day you shall cease to have leavening in your house. Me'erev Yantif. That must be from the day before Yantif. Oh, eino ela b'Yantif atzmai. Maybe it's in Yantif itself. It says you cannot bring the Korban Pesach when you still have chametz. So we know prior to Yantiv already that you cannot have chametz in your house. And so the time that you can bring the Korban Pesach is the time that you may not have chametz anymore. So Rabbi Shmuel says we see from here that you cannot bring the time that you bring the Korban Pesach, you can no longer have chametz in your home. For Rabbi Akiva, we're going to need a couple of teachings to understand what Rabbi Akiva's proof is. And the Gemara is going to state these on the next Amid just to help us understand. The Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion, as we'll see later, the Rabbi Yehuda holds, that the only way to fulfill the obligation of removal of chametz, to have chametz cease in your home, even though we said yesterday and the beginning of the Masechta that tashbisu, according to halacha, it follows the majority opinion that the word tashbisu, making chametz cease, can be done even with a in your heart or verbalizing a releasing of ownership and considering it to be dust of the earth. To you, there is no value. That in your heart and mind is sufficient to make it ownerless, or verbalizing it would be sufficient to make it ownerless. Rabbi Akiva learns that it must be done through destroying the chametz, burning it. That's number one. Number two, even though that on Shabbos we may not make a fire. On Yantif, you're allowed to make a fire and cook. However, Rabbi Akiva is going to say that it must be for a Yantiv need. If there's no Yantiv need, like cooking, then you're not allowed to, cooking for Yantiv, then you're not allowed to ignite a fire. And this is a concept of whether or not you say mitoch shehutra letzerach hutra namishal letzerach. Since it was the igniting of a fire, the making a fire was permissible for the need of Yantiv, cooking, it's permissible even without a need. And Rabbi Akiva is going to say that destroying of the chametz is not going to be a need. And a third thing he's going to say that when the Torah mentions specifically, even though the Torah said a general do not do work on Shabbos, the Torah mentions specifically lighting a fire. Do not ignite a fire on Shabbos in all your homes. That specification of igniting a fire is a machlokas of whether it's there to tell you that each individual of the 39 malachas are an independent primary malacha, primary prohibited work, or does it diminish Shabbos to exclude it and make it less? And Rabbi Akiva is going to say that no, it's not a lesser degree prohibition. It is just to tell you that each one of the prohibitions are separate. But what we need for understanding of Rabbi Akiva is that he says, look, it says on the first day you shall destroy your chametz by fire, and therefore it cannot be on the first day of Yantif because you cannot make such a fire on Yantif. Must be the day before. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't need the proof from the verse that you can't bring the Korban Pesach while you have chametz. The destruction of chametz itself cannot happen on Yantif. It says, Ach bayom harishon. However, on the first day, tashbisu sa'or mebetechem, you must make cease the sa'or from your house, which is the leavening. Uksiv, but it also says kamalecha lesasu. You cannot do any of the work. So you cannot do work that you can't do, work that you cannot do on Shabbos. You cannot do on Yantif. Umetzinu lahavar shiyam malacha. And we find that igniting a fire is going to be a Torah prohibition, a primary prohibition of Shabbos. And therefore, the Torah could not have meant destroying the chametz on Pesach. It means prior to Yantiv, because you're actually not allowed to make that fire on Yantiv. Rabbi Yossi says, "Ein tzarich." I don't need that kind of proof. It says, it says on the first day you will remove chametz. You will make cease chametz from your house. Erev Yantif, and that must be the day before Yantif, and perhaps not. Maybe it means on Yantif itself. It says no. You have to separate it, split the day. And Yantif, there is no split of the day. On Yantif, there's no moment that you can have chametz, as it clearly states. For 7 days, you cannot have any chametz, because if you eat chametz, the soul is cut off. So, iskish hashbasa sar lachilas chametz, and the destruction of the chametz or removing of the chametz is the Torah clearly links to the prohibition of eating chametz, and the prohibition of eating chametz applies whenever the obligation of eating matzah is vachilas chametz achilas matzah, as we stated earlier, and it says be'erev tochel matzah, in the first evening you're already obligated in eating matzah, and when you eat matzah you're prohibited in eating chametz. And when you and you have to not have chametz in your home when you're not allowed to eat chametz, so therefore the removal of chametz must come beforehand. And chalak splits the day, tells you that, but part of the 14th day, the day before Yantiv, you must remove the chametz or have it cease to be. These are the multiple ways that we see from the Torah that the prohibition of chametz begins immediately with the onset of Yantiv, and the obligation to remove chametz must be prior to Yantiv, either on account of splits the day and tells us noon, or from the time that the Korban Pesach is obligated. You can no longer have chametz, as it says. You cannot bring the Korban Pesach upon chametz, and therefore from noon on the 14th of Nisan, you must not have chametz in possession anymore. Amar Rava. So now we turn to 5b, Hey Amid Base. Amar Rav Shemami Named Rabbi Akiva Tlas. We hear three opinions in this statement of Rabbi Akiva. Shemamina in Beir Chametz El B'Sreifa. Number one, as we mentioned, that the only way to get rid of chametz is by burning it. Ushmamina Havara L'Chalek Yatzis, and that Havara is a primary, one of the 39 primary malachas that is fundamental, and it's considered an av, a primary, and therefore he says it cannot be that you would do this in order to get rid of the chametz. And we also see, not like the opinion, which we will see many times, not like the opinion that says that since the Torah allows you to make a fire for the need of cooking, you're also allowed to make a fire for some other lesser need or on Yantiv. And this is considered hoyel. Hoyel, since the Torah said that it's permissible more broadly than that as well. And Rabbi Akiva is going to be of the opinion we do not say that, and therefore you cannot light the fire even to get rid of chametz. It must be, therefore, the chametz is getting rid of chametz according to Rabbi Akiva. This is the proof that it has to be done prior to Yantiv. So now we saw three statements in the Torah of not having chametz in possession. These are the two terms that we call bal yera'eh or bal yematzeh. You shall not see it or find it. So in Shemos 12, it says, for 7 days, sa'or lo yematzeh bevatechem. Leavening shall not be found in your homes. However, in Shemos 13, it's a little bit more direct to you. It says, 7 days you shall eat matzah. V'lo yera'eh lecha chametz. It shall not be seen to you chametz. V'lo yera'eh lecha, and it shall not be seen to you sa'or, leavening in all of your boundaries. B'chol gevulecha. Not only as it says before bevatechem. Here it's broader. It says b'chol gevulecha, in all of your borders, meaning in all of your space. And this is repeated almost verbatim in Devarim. It says there as well, now, so the Gemara is going to say, Tana Rabbana, the Brisa taught, it says, 7 days you shall not find chametz in your homes. Why do we need that verse if it already say in the next chapter, it says you shall not see to yourself chametz or leavening, in all of your borders. Because in that verse it says you shall not see for yourself. Perhaps it can't be that which belongs to you that you see. You cannot own chametz in your possession. But perhaps if it belongs to others, meaning non-Jews, or it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, so it doesn't belong to a particular Jew, maybe then, even if you have chametz in your possession, but you've already donated to the Beis Hamikdash, or it belongs to a non-Jew, and you're just in possession of it, that it would be permissible. Or it says you shall not see chametz. Yochel yatmin. Perhaps if I just lock it up in a storage room and I can't see it, or I can take possession on account. I can take a deposit from someone of chametz from a non-Jew, and these would all be permissible in my possession because it says you shall not see for yourself lecha, that which is yours. Therefore, in the verse of not finding it means even if you don't see it right now, but you can find it, you know where it is. So you cannot find chametz, and it doesn't say your own, it doesn't say shalacha. So ainli alam benachri, shalikav shasik. And now the Gemara is going to say something enigmatic, and the Gemara later is going to ask what this means. It says perhaps that's only by a non-Jew that you do not take possession of. And doesn't live in your property, in your courtyard. If you have a servant, or someone lives in your possession, in your courtyard. How do we know that even there there's a prohibition? It can't be found in your house. You cannot have chametz found in any of your homes. Okay, so it can't be in your home. But maybe it can be out in the end of my property in a cave or a pit. So that's why the other verse ends with in any of your borders, anywhere on your property. So, okay, so it says in one, I cannot find it in my house. In the other, it says, I cannot see it of my own in my property. So maybe there's a limit. In my house, whether it's mine or someone else's, whether it's visible or be in a closet. Either way, I can't have it. But out in the field, it's only prohibited if it's mine and it's visible. And perhaps I would say, still, in the home, you cannot see it or find it, meaning even if it's not visible, you put it away in a closet. And therefore, you're not allowed to hide it. And even if it's not yours, if it's somebody else's, you can't get a deposit from a non-Jew and hold on to it. However, out in the borders, out in the fields, there's only a prohibition of your own, but you're allowed to see, meaning you're allowed to have possession of someone else's or of that which is donated to the Beis HaMikdash. How do we know that they're actually covering each other, and that which the prohibition in Lo Yamatze, where it says in your home, applies also to the field, and what applies to the field also applies to the home. That's why the Torah repeated leavening in both of them. It didn't only say chametz, it also said leavening sa'or, to tell you that whatever applies in one verse applies to the other as well. Nemar sa'or babatim. It says, do not allow leavening to be found in your homes. And sa'or le'yamatzav b'batechem. Nemar sa'or begvulit. And it also says in the borders, meaning out in the field, it also says sa'or. Lo yara l'cha sa'or, even though that's not necessary because it already says do not have chametz, and I would know leavening is prohibited as well. And just as in lo yamatze, it means whether you can see it or not, even if you've locked it up in a closet, and even if it's not yours, it belongs to someone else. It's also going to be prohibited on account of, it says just it shall not be found in your house, regardless of whether it's yours or not, regardless of whether it's visible or not. So too, out in the borders of a Mishum Bal Yara Ubal Yamatze, there's a prohibition of seeing it as well as finding it. And also, you cannot just lock it up and have it hidden away, or it's not yours. If you receive it as a deposit, as something that you're guarding for someone else, nevertheless, on Pesach, that's prohibited. And the other way around as well. And just as in the field, you can see you're allowed to have something that belongs to someone else if it's not yours. But you can have somebody else's in the home as well. So Gemara is going to ask, wait, you just told me that I cannot have a deposit from someone else of chametz, even in my out in my field in my possession, and then you say somebody else's chametz in my house is allowed. That's contradictory. What's the distinction? The Gemara is going to ask it in the Brisa itself. It made a distinction between a nachrisha kivshaso, a non-Jew that you take possession of, meaning a servant, or living in your courtyard. So what does that mean? Amamar, perhaps this is only a prohibition for produce for chametz that comes from a non-Jew that is not in your possession and not living in your courtyard. But a servant or someone living in your domicile, then minayin, how do we know that's prohibited? So therefore it says it shall not be found in your house. The Gemara says kalapi lai. Which direction are you going on this? Because it would seem more plausible to prohibit someone living in your home or someone that's your servant, not less likely. Abaye says, right, you have to switch that around and say, that if he's living in your home and part of your household, that's where it's prohibited. No, it's going on the other part. On the first part where it says that you're allowed to take a non-Jew's chametz into your home, but you can't, the prohibition is only having your own chametz. That means if the non-Jew is not a part of your household, because you didn't take possession of him or he's not living in your courtyard. But if it's your servant or someone living with you, how do we know that that is permissible? Therefore, the Torah says you cannot be found in your home. It's prohibited. The Gemara says, wait, that doesn't make sense either. He's guiding us towards saying it's permissible. Don't think only if he's not your servant, you're allowed to have his chametz in your possession. But even if he's a servant, you're allowed to have his chametz in your possession. You may not have it. And then it says that it's prohibited. So which way is it? So Gemara says, it says to you multiple times, and therefore it means not only to you. It says you shall not find your chametz, shall not find your sa'or, you shall not. And then again in Devarim, in the last book of the Torah, it also says you shall not have for you chametz. And these three times that it says to you of yours must be that where it says lo yamatzeh, that which is to you, to tell you that anybody living with you in your home, that it would be permissible unless it is yours, actually yours. The Gemara says, okay, so now we have a contradiction. We have the one hand that says you may not own chametz, but you can see somebody else's chametz in your home. And then it says you're not allowed to receive in your possession chametz from a non-Jew. So that's why in the one verse it did not say shalacha, your chametz. It just says lo yamatzeh, it shall not be found in your home. And then it says that you are allowed to. So how does this go? So Amamar, the teacher had said, perhaps you're not allowed to, perhaps you're allowed to receive in your possession chametz that you're taking care of for your a deposit that you're taking care of for a non-Jew. It says no, you may not find it. Amras Reisha, but just before that you said the prohibition is not to see your own chametz, but you are allowed to see someone else's chametz. It says the idea is whether you are responsible for it, then it counts as yours. And that's the distinction the Torah is making here. You cannot find in your home chametz. It's got to be your home, and meaning that somehow you're responsible for this chametz. Even if it belongs to someone else, but if you would be held responsible if this chametz disappears, that means that it is yours in as much as it's under your protective responsibility. It's in your possession in that way that there's a potential loss for you if this chametz doesn't show up. However, if the chametz is completely in the possession of the non-Jew, so a non-Jew walks into your home on Pesach and says, hey, how you guys doing? And he's eating a sandwich. You don't have to say, hey, take that out of my house. I mean, it may make some of us very nervous, but there is no transgression of having chametz in your possession because that's theirs. So when you accept responsibility for it, or you did not accept responsibility. Like Rava said to the people of Mechuzah, when the redcoats come and move into your house and tell you have to store their food, you have to remove that from Pesach. Why? Since if any of that would get lost or any of it would be stolen, you'd be held responsible. and you would have to pay kidulachon dami. It is considered yours since you would have to pay for it. So essentially, this is a monetary obligation you have toward these chametz, essentially making it yours. And the Gemara tomorrow we'll see talks about a general concept about davar hagorim l'mammon. Anything that would cause you financial responsibility, does that mean it is yours?